I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Our topic today is rationality and humor, or the other way around. We run these events 3 times a week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. If you're watching this on YouTube and would like to join us live and take part in the discussion, you can follow the link to the London Ayn Rand meetup where we post these events and sign up, and you'll get a Zoom link right before we start. And if you're here with us live and you want to watch these events later, you can go to the Ayn Rand Center UK channel on YouTube, and they are all posted there unless we forget to record them. So our speakers tonight are philosopher and novelist Dr. Andrew Bernstein, whose name came up in that one discussion about humor that was not recorded. So we might bring that topic up again. And also with us is YouTube sensation parody rapper Rucka Rucka Ali. I actually don't know if either of you have very long opening statements about this or any opening statements at all.
So I'm not a philosopher now? There's my opening statement. I'm joking. Dr. Bernstein, maybe you have some thoughts you'd like to open with, and maybe I can sort of bounce off of that.
Well, I just wanted to say, that philosophy and humor and philosophy is not a specialty of mine. I don't know that I have, anything original to add to this, although I like to think I bring humor into my lectures and classes. But it's one thing that occurs to me because Ayn Rand, of course, talks about the moral rectitude of ridiculing the irrational, which and that there's a great deal of humor in that. And look at in the Fountainhead is just so rich with that. I mean, there are people who read Ayn Rand's novels and say she has no sense of humor. What book were you reading? I mean, for instance, you look at all the modern artists and modernists. Oh, this one thing I got to say before it slips my mind. Gordon L. Prescott. I mean, I can't even think of him. That the Hegelian speaking, the architect in the Fountainhead who speaks in Hegelian dialectic. I mean, you read his quotes for what he says, and I mean, it's hilariously funny. I mean, Ayn Rand's humor is at a very high intellectual level. I mean, she's parodying that dialectical thinking of the Hegelian tradition, Hegel, Marx, and so on. And it's just hilarious that the nonsensical, things that Gordon L. Prescott says in the Fountainhead. But all through that book, I remember that Tui's modernist artist followers. There was one guy who created a new art form. Nobody knew what it was. They just knew it had something to do with bird cages and microphones. I mean, Ayn Rand is satirizing modern art. I mean, it's hilarious. And of course, Lois Cook, clouds and shrouds. The foam dome in the mouth, Roman foam dome. Ayn Rand satirizing, the Gertrude Stein, word salad school of literature. So I mean, it's how Ayn Rand's humor is very, very, very effective, but it's at a very high intellectual level. So so readers who are familiar with modern art, modern philosophy, they don't have to have a PhD in literature, but if they're familiar with modern art and modern philosophy, I think they could see how funny that is. Now, it's just the other thing I wanted to say here is the modern politics. I mean, it's so crazy, especially from the left. I mean, Trump and the Republicans are bad enough in the United States, but from the left, and I think it's the same in the UK with people like Jeremy Corbyn, and so on. But I mean, they are just ripe for parody, and the one thing that really comes to my mind is the LGBTQXYZ, phenomenon. And I think we need to be very clear as supporters of individual rights that consenting adults have the moral right and must have the legally protected right to have sex in whatever form they want, or with whomever they want. That's an inalienable right of an individual who's consenting and who's legally an adult. But the thing that's bizarre here is the idea that you could be any gender you want to be. That it's just if that you're any gender you identify with. So I remember my daughter who's now 17, she's going to college in the fall. Where were we? It was the University of Florida in July. And yeah, you want to have a miserable time? Go to Florida in July, guys. But I hope you like it. But anyhow, there was a guy taking us through showing us around the school. And she was generally very good. And a bunch of students and their parents. It was actually my daughter Penny who raised the question. She said, "Would I have to, share a bathroom with, with different gender?" And the guide answered. I remember the exact quote. She said, "You will not have to share a bathroom with someone who identifies as a different gender than you." So I didn't say anything, but unquote. So the question that popped into my head right away is, yeah, but will she have to share a bathroom with somebody who is a different gender than her? But the idea you could be any, you could identify, you're biologically male, you can identify as female, that makes you a female. You could compete in women's sports, and so on. So here's let me make a serious point, then a parody, and then we can move on. But the serious point on this is a story attributed to Abraham Lincoln, which may be real, it may be apocryphal, I'm not sure. But this is perfect for common sense. Lincoln was a great common sense thinker, and it's perfect to express Ayn Rand's primacy of existence principle, because evidently he's addressing a backwoods audience in the backwoods. And he asks the audience, well, if we call a horse's tail a leg, how many legs will the horse then have? And the audience said 5. The horse will have 5 legs. And Lincoln responded, no, the horse will have 4 legs, because calling a tail a leg will not make it so. And that's a perfect, primacy of existence statement. And it certainly applies to the LBGQXYZ, mentality that we're any gender we identify with. Calling myself a female, or if society believes I'm a female, will not make it. Anyhow, I have other things to say on this, but I don't want to monopolize the beginning. So why don't we just come back to it later?
Well, we've never had a guest, a speaker, walk off an event, but now that you've suggested that it's okay to parody the LGBTQ community, I'm thinking Rucka might be offended, because I know he's very much against that. Rucka.
Thanks, Rozzy. Yeah. So the discussion of what is comedy, what is funny, why are things funny, for me entails a lot of reverse engineering and trying to pick apart and tinker with kind of the finished product. So it's a tough one. I'm by no means a scholar. I'm by no means a comedy theorist or anything like that. So any discussion I have about this topic is very much me sort of grappling with something that I don't really have an explicit, clear theory or philosophy on. There's a lot of different types of comedy as well, a lot of different strands of humor. It's ever changing, some would say evolving, similar to music. If you look at rock and roll, and you maybe saw early signs of it in, I don't know, the 20s, and then in the 1950s, people probably thought, wow, rock and roll can't possibly get more advanced than this right here. Jump forward to today, and we have all these various types of heavy metal and electronic, punk, this, that, and the other. I mean, it would have been inconceivable to think of how much innovation and advancement would take place with just rock and roll, for instance. I think similarly with comedy. I mean, what people laugh about online today with memes, the type of humor that young people are engaging in, would confuse people even just in the 90s, I think, even just before the internet became what it became. So there's that. With regards to the author who brings us all together here today, the other day we spoke to Josh Dixon, and he mentioned that Rand satirizes socialites, those who's who party types in the Fountainhead, like Kiki Holcomb and her friends. They throw these parties where kind of the who's who are invited, and all the fashionable artists and fashionable intellectuals are invited, and Rand satirizes them. And that was a very interesting thing for Josh to point out. And I recall I added to that in Atlas Shrugged, I think Rand does the same with politicians, or even more than politicians, bureaucrats, cronies, professors, like the bad ones, she satirizes these types, and that is powerful. And what that one of the many things that can offer you as a reader is that you don't feel intimidated by these types of people anymore. If you're not part of the in group, you're not invited to this certain type of socialite gathering, rather than feeling like there's something wrong with you, like there's something you're not getting, you might look at them a different way. Similarly with cronies and bureaucrats, you might feel like there's something wrong with you because you don't know how to schmooze the right way. You don't know how to network the way that these cronies do with bureaucrats. But to kind of get a closer look at kind of what's going on there, the way that Rand depicts them, can be very liberating, I think. So there's a thought that I had just now. Again, comedy and humor it's complicated. I personally, as a layman, as someone whose opinion reflects no empirical study whatsoever, but my own thoughts and opinions, I think a sense of humor might be as complicated as what goes into your sexual preferences, maybe. I know there's probably some differences between the two, but there might be some parallels as well. It's so difficult to trace what makes somebody turned on by what it is that turns them on. And I've been wondering if a sense of humor is similarly integrated with so many of your influences and so many of the things you've concluded and evaluated, and so much of the work that your subconscious has done throughout your life. So in short, it's complicated.
Agreed, Rucka. You're right.
There it is.
Andy, did you want to elaborate on Rucka's point?
Yeah, actually, because back in the day when there were actually movie theaters that you could go to and stuff, back in the before the great pandemic of 2020, which I don't mean to make light of, by the way. It's serious, but a lot of times I'd go to the movies. I'm a movie guy. I go to the movies like 3 times a week when they're actually movies. But a lot of times I'll find myself laughing, and I'm like the only one in the theater laughing. I can hear the rest of the audience is quiet. So your Rucka's point, I think empirically, as one example, is certainly true. That a sense of humor is often as distinctively personal as is our response to a work of art. Notice, for example, how as many objectivists, we agree on philosophic fundamentals, but we disagree on movies all the time. What's good, what isn't, what we like, what we don't like, and so forth. Now, I notice a few things. So I'm often laughing I find myself often laughing in exaltation. That when I see a hero who does some noble deed, it's not funny in the sense Ayn Rand points out that this is degrading. It's the exact opposite. It's exalted, and I'm laughing and appreciating. I'm enjoying this so much. I gotta laugh. And this guy, this man or woman does these great things. And I think there is such a thing as laughing in exaltation, laughing not at but with the heroic and the noble and the exalted in a sense of appreciation. Where is it? I mean, I think it's in The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald's novel, where one of the minor characters said, he's like this very self-confident, almost cocky kind of guy. He says, I survived, 6 wars and a revolution. He's larger than life. He lived through all. He's got arrow wounds and everything. I survived, and I laughed at that. And that's an exalted state, and I laughed in enjoyment and in appreciation of that. So I think that's one thing where people and most people I know in the audience won't laugh at that. And another thing related to that is the outrageous. When somebody does something that's outrageous or over the top, I appreciate it. I have have a great sense of of camaraderie with that, and I'll laugh again, not laughing at, but laughing with this outrageous character or this outrageous act performed by this character, because it's a way of enjoying it. For me, it's an act of appreciation and saluting this. And somebody said to me, you know, that's not funny. Why are you laughing? I said, how am I going to explain this to you? It's like, I'm laughing, you know, I'm laughing in appreciation of this person's stature. But I think, you know, that's the two examples that come to mind. I think Rucka's definitely right. There are different things that different people will regard as funny. There are different bases for a sense of humor, even amongst people who share philosophic fundamentals.
And even within the same one person, there can be different moods and just different facets of life. So the one person might watch an episode of SpongeBob and get a hearty laugh out of that. And in another instance, be reading one of the epic moments in Atlas Shrugged. I don't remember if it was Josh who brought this up last time, but at the end of John Galt's long speech, one of the villains says, "That didn't happen." That is, that is like, you might laugh like, wow, like just, that is epic. Okay, this is epic, you might say. So there's different, even within the one person with one set of beliefs, different times, different places, different moods, focusing on different things. There are different types of a response you might have. You might respond differently to different jokes for different reasons.
Along those lines, so we spoke on Saturday. We gave Andy the nickname Andrew Dice Bernstein. I'm still not sure how much he appreciates it.
Well, Rucka had applied that to me a long time ago.
Yeah, and I was wondering. I'm going to unmute Nikos actually, because Nikos and I are among the people who, in preparation for today, did our research. I mean, I've seen Andrew Dice Clay before, but I rewatched some of his stuff and watched a documentary about him. Andy, what do you think about that type of humor and the people who find it funny? I'm not going to name names and accuse Nikos of being one of them.
Well, I mean, I haven't watched Dice Man in a long time. First of all, this is just a personal response here. Generally, I never thought he was particularly fun. You know, I mean, like I know back when he was first burst on the scene, when was that, late 80s, early 90s, and you know, he was a big star. I remember, you know, there were a lot of old school comedians who were still alive, like Bob Hope, you know, and George Burns and people like that, people who lived into their hundreds. And by the way, some of these guys were really funny. You know, Bob, you guys are a lot younger than me, but you know who Bob Hope was? You know, he was a big time comedian. I mean, I don't know that there's anybody today, you know, at that stature. I mean, he was a huge success. Anyhow, the story I read, when he on his deathbed, this was like 15 or so years ago. You know, his daughter, who was like 80, he was 103 or something. His daughter, who was like 80, told this story that you know, her mother, Bob Hope's wife, he's dying, and his wife says to him, "Bob, I just realized, you know, we didn't come up with an epitaph for your tombstone. What do you want on your tombstone?" And Bob Hope in real time responded, "Surprise me." You know, I mean, this is the kind of, you know, quick, on your feet kind of sense of humor that some of these guys have. Bob Hope, some of George Burns, people like that, pointed out about Dice Man that there's no jokes here. Where are the jokes? He says he's cussing and swearing. He's complaining about immigrants. What's the cleaned up version about immigrants? There should be a big sign at the airport. If you don't speak the bleeping language, get out of the bleeping country. And okay, that's kind of funny. But he's obnoxious and he trades on that, and everything's bashing women and gays and immigrants and stuff. All right. I support Dice Man because he's so politically incorrect. So I don't think he's especially funny. I mean, Dave Chappelle is funny, and I like Dave Chappelle a lot. I don't think Dice Man's particularly funny, although I will never hear nursery rhymes in the same way again after his version of them, which obviously we can't repeat, on the air. They're so obscene. I don't find them that funny, but sense of humor is very personal, and I don't condemn people who find funny somebody I don't find particularly funny. I strongly support him simply because he's so politically incorrect, and I think in a culture that wants to suppress all kinds of speech for all kinds of reasons, including that it might offend somebody, I think people like Dice Man should be strongly supported. I certainly support him.
I'm not that familiar with Andrew Dice.
But you named
Clay.
me after him anyway.
Andrew Dice Clay. Yeah. The funny thing is, I don't know if this is funny. I know comedy is a tricky one, but the reason, a mutual friend of ours, Andy, once told me that you were a longtime fan of Andrew Dice Clay. That's where that all began. So we can trace it back to a dishonest. I'm joking. It was an error.
Well, it's two kids from Brooklyn, right?
Exactly. So that's where the association first formed in my mind. So I'm not that familiar with Andrew Dice Clay, but I think it brings to mind the fact that a lot of what we find funny is often kind of the personality of the person who's delivering the content, and oftentimes the response of the audience. So Andrew Dice Clay, suppose, is standing next to George Bush Sr. That to me would be hilarious to watch, just the clash between them. So it's not so much that Andrew Dice Clay is this brilliant thinker who comes up with all these observations. It's just the way his personality sort of integrates with what else is around and what else is in the culture and how people might respond. And so I think a lot of comedy can be sort of personality driven. I've heard it has been said in this town, in Tinseltown, that what killed Andrew Dice Clay's career was the fact that he never broke character. Even when he was giving interviews, he was still playing that character. And people said, all right, this guy is a bigot. And they ran him out of town. So there's a little sidebar for you. Not particularly too familiar with him. I imagine I would find him amusing, because that's funny to me. Just this obnoxious character who's just saying these outrageous things, kind of like Al Bundy, or who is the earlier version, Archie Bunker. It's silly. It's somewhat a little bit endearing at the same time, and it's stupid. Yeah, I guess there's my answer. That's all I've got for you.
All right. Well, Nikos is the Ayn Rand Center UK academic advisor, and he has also been studying Andrew Dice Clay for the past few days in a very academic manner. So, Nikos, what are your thoughts?
Well, by studying, it means I've kind of checked him out. No, I haven't got an opinion because, I'm neither here nor there, but I have a comment and a question. So I found very, 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 very interesting Rucka's point about the relationship between humor and sexuality in two ways. The first is that it cannot be policed. So someone, for example, can tell you for the next 8 months that married with children is bigoted humor and you shouldn't laugh. You'll still laugh. But there's also something else in terms of with the sexuality, that at the end of the day, you can switch and you can change what you find appealing. So I found throughout my life that when I changed political, philosophical views, whatever, also the type of women that attract me, the type of character that attracts me also slightly changed. And I think Betty mentioned in the comment something about laughing when others are not laughing. So when I was growing up, I was a complete second-hander. My one and only rebellion, there was this film in 1999 in Greece called Safe Sex. And this film was a phenomenon because something like 15% of the Greek population watched that film at the cinema. And everyone found it hilarious. Like there were people like falling down from laughing. And at the highlight of my second-handness, I didn't even make this for 2 hours because I found the humor so stupid and like non-existent that it was the first time that I thought, you know what, maybe following what everyone does is not a great way to go through life. Anyway, that was the comment. The question is to both Rucka and Andrew. And there's all this discussion nowadays about humor punching up and punching down. So for example, they say, there's this Twitter sensation, Titania McGrath, which is making fun of the so-called woke culture. And I happen to know the guy, and he's a great guy, and but there's this criticism that you make fun of people who are let's say, to use the common term, vulnerable. Now, I will play devil's advocate here. Okay, I'm not saying necessarily that I agree with that. So do you think, Andy and Rucka, that there is such a thing as humor punching up and punching down? And so, for example, a lot of people saying, oh, you know, the Nazis made fun of the Jews and this kind of created their dehumanizing. And also there's a lot of discussion in Rwanda that the Hutus there was this radio program that kind of lifted the spirits of the genociders and kind of, so yeah, that's my point and the question.
Humor doing what? Up and down? What was that word?
Making fun of the other tribe and inflammating, how is it called? Making inflammatory comments that started from sarcasm but kind of escalated in tribal hate.
You know, it's interesting. Rucka, did you want to start on this?
I can try to share some half-baked thoughts. So obviously context is everything. You know, Seth MacFarlane in Family Guy in the 2000s, caricaturizing Jewish people is not the same as, you know, Nazis spray painting big nose caricatures on synagogues that, you know, or on trains that are, you know, carrying the Jewish prisoners to their death. There is, so there is context, but now the question is, yeah, so, but are you bringing about the next persecution by dehumanizing people that way? It's a good question. But my answer to all these types of questions is typically, well, rather than focusing on if this is negative or not, what's the positive? The positive is individualism. The positive is independence. Every person can and ought to think independently, live the life he wants, pursue the values he wants. If those are the ideas that are being perpetuated in the culture, then I don't think we need to be afraid of silly stereotypes anymore. We might stop finding them funny, in which case I'll have to find a new direction. But I think there's kind of my answer is, in general, look for the positive rather than kind of what may be done wrong, I guess. There's my half-baked answer. Dr. Bernstein, you have the floor.
Yeah, I see. This is a good example because I like ethnic humor a lot, and you know, and jokes about every different ethnic group. And if you guys know Dave Chappelle, you know, who I think is a top flight, you know, comedian today, and he bashes everybody. He does it in a good-natured way. I like, you know, jokes about every different ethnic group, you know, either gender, any sexual orientation. So, you know, but I think you need to be very clear. It's humor, that we don't literally think this. You know, there's a line, and it's not a thin line. I think there's a strong, sharp, deep, long, wide, profound line between ethnic humor and bigotry. Now, bigotry is an irrational phenomenon. You're judging somebody not as an individual human being based on what's volitionally open to them, you know, their own thinking and their own choices. You're judging them rather on what gender they were born into or what race they were born into, or, you know, and so forth. But so I think first thing, you know, if I was a comedian doing this, I would start out with like a 30-second. I am a devout individualist. I don't, you know, I take every human being as an individual based on their own thinking, their own judgment, their own values, their own choices, their own character, not whatever group they happen to be born into. Now, having said that, we can have fun with this. We're individualists. We can have fun with ethnic humor. And so, for example, or gender. So, for example, I remember one time I was down in Clemson, South Carolina, and we were with some friends of mine. We're going through a Starbucks drive-through, and the young college student, the poor girl, was having trouble making the change. And I said in the car, I said, her tiny little female brain is having trouble with this higher mathematics, you know. And of course, everybody fell out laughing. They know that I'm not serious. I don't think that, you know, intelligence is gender dependent. I mean, Ayn Rand is the greatest genius of the, you know, of the last, I don't know, 1,000 years maybe. What gender was she? Yeah, she was a girl. You know, and so, but you make as a joke in a context where people are clear, you know, that you're an individualist. You don't judge people by what ethnic group they are what gender they are. I think that needs to be made clear. Then as individualists, I think we can have fun with this, and certainly can stand up against the politically correct establishment and say, hey, I'm an individualist. You're the collectivist. You're the ones who think race is important. You're the ones who think ethnicity and gender are important. I realize that morally it's not important. So I can have fun with it. If you don't like it, well, it's a free country, but you can't suppress my freedom of speech.
We do live in a culture where from all directions, from the left, from the right, from the from the postmodernists and the sort of biological determinists, it seems like everyone is saying your racial group is inescapable. It's an inescapable part of who you are, or your sexual preference group, whatever it is, that you're part of a group that you cannot escape. And that's the important thing about you. And that the sooner you accept that, the better. That seems to be the consensus for most intellectuals that don't have Ayn Rand. When Razi introduced me earlier and jokingly said, "Oh, Rucka might storm off because you said it's okay to make fun of LGBT and all that," well, that got me thinking. Most of my comedy, like most of my jokes, have not really been so much focused on all of that, because I'm kind of more confused by all of that than anything. I find the racial stuff and the national stuff, the geographical stuff, that to me is just open shut, like absurd. There's just such a kind of a independent, first-handed premise in. I look back at my life and sort of the life I was handed and the decisions I made every step of the way, and sort of the very sort of bumpy pursuit for the life I wanted. It's absurd to me to say that like a person is determined by the nation that they were born into or by the race that they're related to. That, like, to me, it's just so open shut, absurd, that like joking about it to me is just nothing but fun. But whatever's happening out there with the genders and with all of that it's too confusing for me. I don't know. I don't know why I haven't yet found much humor in it for the most part. And I've also, now I'm realizing I have not made fun of women very much. Maybe I'll psychologize myself for a moment and say maybe that's my subconscious saying don't mock your own values. But I've mostly made fun of men. That's an interesting thing. But again, I'm kind of reverse engineering here, trying to understand what it is. I think like group politics, group identity is just so open shut, absurd. Unfortunately, the culture out there disagrees. It virtually everywhere. But to me, it's just so open shut, absurd that like joking about it seems like the most natural thing in the world.
You're very in touch with your feminine side, Rucka.
Very true, which speaks to the issues that we're confronting in society today, doesn't it?
One thing that I wouldn't make jokes about are real victims, of who are victimized by criminals or dictators or terrorists who initiate violent force against them. It's so rape victims and people who are assaulted, things like that. It's a free country. I think people have the right to speak, the inalienable right to say what they will. They want to make fun or make jokes about victims of assault or rape or murder or some heinous crime like that. They're free to do so, but I think it's in very bad taste. I don't think it's funny, and and they have the right to do it. I have the right to reject it and condemn it.
Mm-hmm. In my earlier years, I did satirize rape in a way that I don't anymore. But like more recently, around 2018, with the height of the Kavanaugh controversy, I had a song called "Believe Her," which was sort of like, I think, abstracting from the culture the way that rape is used by the feminists, by the anti-feminists. Everyone's talking about this like it's not even about the rape anymore. It's about like, are women good or are men better? It's just like the way it just kind of lampoons the whole way that the issue of rape is used as a political instrument rather than actually what it is. But yeah, that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, well, actual rape is a heinous crime. I mean, it's a brutal violation of a woman's right, or a man, in some cases, but generally women. It's a brutal violation of a woman's right to her own body, her own mind, her own judgment, her own choice. And I think we need to make very clear, that one, we're very aware of that, and two, how many women are actually raped, and the rapists get away with it because it's usually he said, she said, and you can't prove it in court. It's in private, and given in American jurisprudence, the presumption of innocence until unless proven guilty, which is logically and morally proper, it's very, very, very difficult in many cases to get a rape conviction. And I always tell my daughter and my students, be careful who you're alone with, especially when alcohol's involved, because most men, will respect your rights and some will protect your rights, but there are some who will not. So there's that's a serious issue. We always have to make clear that we're very aware of how many women are actually rape victims. But once we do that, then we get to that modern leftist mentality that we're going to believe any woman who says that she was molested or raped just because she said so without any corroborating evidence, like Christine Blasey Ford, who, I mean, it's very possible Kavanaugh molested her. I mean, I have no way of knowing. But her case was flimsy. I mean, she couldn't remember where the party was, when it was, how she got there, how she got home from there. Her best friend, what's her name, Leland Kaiser. Blasey Ford said would corroborate it. Leland Kaiser said public, I don't know Kavanaugh, and I've never been at a party with him. I mean, the case was very flimsy. And the leftists never mentioned whatever Kavanaugh did or did not do as a teenager. His record as an adult is exemplary. This is not Bill Clinton, or Joe Biden, evidently. I mean, he had dozens of women who clerked for him who came forward publicly and said what a gentleman he was, how respectful of their rights he was. It was a witch hunt, and it was a political witch hunt at that point. And I make fun of them of that mentality, that the Me Too movement mentality, when they are going to believe any woman who makes any accusation against a man, especially somebody who's not a leftist, especially against a supporter of capitalism, without any corroborating evidence, and they're going to dismiss the presumption of innocence until unless proven guilty. They're very wrong, on this. And the issue is complicated. We have to sort this out about the actual, endless violence against innocent women that actually does occur and goes unpunished. Then from that's what, let me conclude with this. Because rape is such a heinous crime, that's why bearing false witness is a very bad thing. The more heinous the crime about which you bear false witness, the more severe the moral culpability is of bearing false witness about it. Murder obviously is the worst, but rape is up high on that list.
Yeah, and the whole point of the Believe Her movement was that you need to believe a woman when she accuses, regardless of evidence. So, and I think that was what Rucka.
Yeah, and that's illogical. It's immoral. It's unjust. What we need, obviously, I mean, Ayn Rand is brilliant on so many points. The principle of individual rights, protecting the right of every individual to his or her own life and his or her own body, and that includes women. We need to teach our kids. Obviously, I always tell my students, we don't treat. I say, gentlemen, I talk to the boys in the class. I say, gentlemen, we don't treat a lady that way, right? And because you know why we don't treat a lady that way? Because we're men. We're not beasts, right? We're men. So the testosterone is coursing through our system. We're powerful male beasts. We're human male beasts, and moral principles are the difference maker. If she says no, that means no. At any point in the interaction, if she says no, that means no. And we stop. Because no matter how strong the sexual desire is, we're men. We're not beasts. A male lion might not stop when the lion says, growl, stop. They're beasts. They don't have moral principles. We do. She says no, we stop, right? And the boys all nod their heads, and I hope they live it out in real time. But at least in theory, they understand it.
I want to say a few things. Well, regarding the believe her movement, it is, believe her no matter what, but it's still confined to a certain partisan line, right? If it's Joe Biden being accused, obviously he needs his day in court. But if it's Kavanaugh, then of course he's guilty.
On real evidence too,
Yeah. I want to say this about why so many instances of rape go unpunished, and this obviously goes beyond humor and philosophy. In fact, it has been increasingly demonstrated that many rape allegations went simply uninvestigated. There have been hundreds of thousands of actual rape kits that were taken from these alleged victims that were just thrown on a shelf and stored away in a warehouse, never sent to the lab, never tested. And that is that is the world we live in. And I would say this points to what a mixed economy has given us. We have police forces around the country whose job it is to catch drug dealers. And when it comes to a rape complaint, not only are they not incentivized to investigate, but they can get penalized. They would be going against the grain. They would be going against their superiors if they try to investigate this complaint. So we need to have a government that is there to protect our rights, our individual rights, not to enforce preventative crimes such as drugs and prostitution. And I think problems like this would be solved. But it's not just that it's a matter of he said, she said in the court. It's that most rape complaints, in my understanding, as journalists are continuously exposing for the last decade at least, they simply go uninvestigated. I don't remember what else I was going to say. So, I've known rape victims who told me they appreciate, like they enjoy humor relating to rape and stuff like that. Now, it's easy to write them off and say, well, it's Stockholm syndrome, or they're confused, they're emotionally unintegrated. I understand that claim as well. Like maybe they shouldn't find it comforting or funny, but I wonder if there is sort of a place for humor relating to horrific things, in the sense that it can lessen the pain. I know a friend whose mother is fighting cancer, and my friend says, jokes about cancer make him feel less sad at times. We can try to figure out, well, should those jokes affect him that way, or is it nothing to joke about? Good questions. I don't have all the answers, but I think it is useful to look inductively at these people and how they often do respond to such types of jokes, and wonder if there's more to learn about this.
Yeah, there's such a thing as gallows humor, right?
I don't know.
They call it gallows humor, and it's often the humor is often presented by the victims themselves rather than some third party making fun of the victims.
We have a few chat questions and a hand raised. Some of the chat questions are very specific to Rucka. I'll ask the first one, and we'll see how we go along. So the first question is, was the intent behind your video Zayn did 9/11? What was the intent behind that video? And the person asking the question also says, I don't mean this judgmentally, I'm just interested.
Well, thank you for saying that. Obviously, we all need to judge one another. We all need to judge our own actions and other people's actions. So I'm not exempt from this, obviously. But part of judging means looking at the full context. And I appreciate the question. I noticed around 2011 or 12 that people were very defensive over this Zayn guy. I sort of lightheartedly tweeted one day, I saw Zayn was trending. I said, who's this Zayn guy? He sounds like a terrorist. And immediately I was swarmed with angry young female fans of this singer. So I said, okay, there's something happening here. And it became this whole world that I crafted. It became very controversial on the internet for a few days or so. And there were videos being made against what I did, and videos being made in my defense. And one of the people defending me, he said, the point of the joke is that someone so innocent is being blamed for something so horrible. So obviously it stuck with me for a reason. I thought that was a pretty eloquent way to put it. To a large degree, I don't understand why things are funny. But clearly it's a joke. Clearly Zayn at age 8 did not commit 9/11 and live to become a famous singer. Now the question of like jokes about 9/11 in general is obviously, it's not easy to win that one, being the guy who jokes about it. It's much easier to moralistically say this is wrong. I guess where I come from in my writing process is that I abstract from the culture what people are talking about. It can range from something horrific or it can range something very trivial. But when something is being spoken about in the news, when something is in the culture, I tend to sort of take that and work that into some type of composition. And so, yeah, there's what I've got for you at the moment.
Andy, I'm not sure you know the song Zayn did 9/11, but do you have any follow-up for that?
Well, like I said before, to me, joking about atrocities like 9/11, if that's what some comedian does, to me that's not funny. There's thousands of innocent people murdered by psychopaths, by religious zealots. I don't think it's something to joke about. I would certainly stand up for the right, the political, legal right of somebody to make jokes about any topic they want. But to me, mass murder is just it's not funny. It's not a topic. It's not a topic for humor. I wouldn't do it.
All right, Nikos then.
Yeah, thanks. On the 9/11 thing, so okay, provocatively, I'll bring a Marxist philosopher in the discussion. So Zizek said something interesting about, if you remember that old film, Life is Beautiful, with Benigni, who won an Oscar. So and the discussion was also about Holocaust jokes. So he said that these are so tragic moments, and I would include 9/11 with that you cannot really make a drama about Holocaust. I mean, some people manage to do it, like Schindler's List, but the event itself is so tragic that you cannot make a drama of it. So he kind of defended this, not lighthearted, this trying to see like a humorous angle, as like there is some life in this horrible drama. So I guess my question is, if someone laughs with a Holocaust joke or a 9/11 joke, should this person feel bad, or is this a way that it can actually be funny, the joke, obviously?
Good question. I know Mel Brooks was one of the pioneers, probably, of maybe, if I had to guess, he was probably one of the first to start joking about this, something even related to the atrocity of the Holocaust, when he did The Producers. I think it was a movie about
spend time for Hitler, right?
Yeah, right. And this group of people said, let's make a movie so bad, or a stage play so bad that it'll bomb. I don't know why they did that, but they did, like Springtime for Hitler. And so now we've got Hitler singing and dancing, and this is a play within a movie, or a movie within a movie. And I'm sure it was controversial at the time. It's still controversial now, just bringing it up. I can understand someone today still saying that Mel Brooks should not have done that, and we never should have normalized joking about Hitler. I don't know. I remember when 9/11 took place, I was 14, and I couldn't believe anyone would joke about it, like in the days and weeks that followed it. Even someone saying the word terrorist casually, I thought was just unspeakable. I think it might be a combination of things. It might be sort of me sort of going down sort of a nihilistic path in my adolescence that made me start to find these things funny, or maybe it was coming from more of a positive place, kind of seeing the spirit of the American people standing resilient and just never letting the sadness kind of be sustained for too long. That made me start to kind of appreciate the way that Americans just joke about everything. And of course, we're all American now, as the internet has flattened the world and brought us all together. Again, this is one of those things where it's like, I don't have the answers. I don't know why something is funny to me, or if it should be. Good question.
Yeah, it is a really fascinating question. I'd make a distinction between joking about the atrocity itself and joking about the perpetrators. You're making fun of the perpetrators. You know, so if we make fun of Hitler, or we make fun of Bin Laden, or we make fun of Stalin, or Mao, or these egregious mass murderers, I think it's different. To me, it just has a different feel than making fun of some poor people in a Soviet gulag who are being worked to death, in a matter of, on slave labor, and die in a matter of months, or somebody who's gassed in a Nazi, death camp, or people in the World Trade Center who were murdered by Bin Laden and those sick fanatics. To me, there's not just a moral distinction. I mean, if people want to make fun, and I remember, wasn't that movie Life is Beautiful?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and I remember, seeing it, in the theaters when it was out, and it was provocative, and it was interesting. I thought Schindler's List was a much more powerful film, on this, but I liked Life is Beautiful as a film. But to me, if they made a satire of, about the perpetrators, and showed the Nazi hierarchy or the Soviet hierarchy or these jihadists as irrational clowns and buffoons, who can't succeed at anything productive or positive. They're not capable of any type of achievement, and all they can do is destroy and make fun of that. That to me would be a much more suitable topic for humor. I would find that a lot funnier. But like we already said, humor is very highly personalized.
Mm-hmm. It is. Life is Beautiful is an incredible movie. I saw it when I was, I guess, 11 or 12 when it was new. Unbelievably powerful. So anyone who hasn't watched it, there's your homework. I imagine, I couldn't presume to try and imagine what it's like to be a survivor of those concentration camps. But I wonder if the sort of trauma of like seeing those scary German soldiers and the sternness and the power that they hold over you, I wonder if in later years, once you've survived that, if seeing Nazis lampooned and ridiculed and shown to be clowns, I wonder if that helps alleviate the trauma. But it's obviously it's very hard for me to say. Now that Dr. Bernstein made this distinction, and I'm thinking back about many of the jokes I've made, and I'm not going to pretend I had this standard going into it, but maybe subconsciously I did. I've lampooned Bin Laden, I've lampooned Hitler. It never occurred to me to joke about, hey, about a man who goes to work at the office when a plane comes crashing through the window. Kind of that side of it never struck me as something to depict in a humorous way. So I'm just again reverse engineering this as I go along.
There's a lot going on in the chat. I can't monitor all of it. So if you have a question and you don't want to ask it live, please send it to me in a private message, and I'll read it out. One question in the chat that I did manage to find regarding ethnic, sexual, and minority humor, who should draw the line? Dr. Bernstein. But that's not me answering the question.
He should answer.
Who should draw the line? And I mean, I haven't thought about this, but in general, I don't think the question is who. I think the question is where. Where do we draw the line? The question about who would be every honest person in their own most rigorously, scrupulously honest, rational judgment. But I think the question for rational human beings is where do we draw the line? And again, I just reiterate what I said before. I think we need to make clear, as if we're humorists or comedians or we're telling a joke or whatever, to an audience, if the people we're speaking to don't already know it, that we are devout individualists. We recognize that race does not matter, gender does not matter, matters romantically, doesn't matter morally. That what matters about human beings is what's open to their volition, what's open to their choice. So the race they're born into is not significant about them. The gender they're born into, intellectually and morally, is not significant. We need to make clear that that's where we stand. And then we could take a very lighthearted approach about ethnic humor. Again, I wouldn't make jokes. To me, I wouldn't make jokes about people who were actual victims of physical violence, you know, with the initiation of force against them. I wouldn't make jokes about rape victims or murder victims, or, you know, or victims of heinous crimes. But I think the key point here is to establish that we're individualists, and consequently, ethnic humor is lighthearted fun, and it's nothing that we take seriously. That, I think, is where the line has to be drawn: a sharp, clear dichotomy between ethnic humor and literal bigotry. I think Dice Man didn't do that. I think you're right, Rucka. I think that's part of what really harmed his career. I don't think Andrew Dice Clay actually, you know, made clear that he was aware of that distinction.
Right. And like I mentioned earlier, we live in a culture where group identity is the norm. That is the moral good in the eyes of most thinkers today. Religious, well, maybe not religious so much, but some religious, and certainly intellectuals. So Andrew Dice Clay doesn't have the moral confidence to defend his type of humor. He doesn't have the philosophic ammunition to deflect the criticism, which is why philosophy is useful equipment. I'm reminded of one of Leonard Peikoff's Ford Hall Forum lectures, where he spoke about reality and objective reality, and one of the women in his Q&A asked, who decides what's real? Who decides what's real? And, or something like that is what she asked. And his answer was something like, he says, you're a child of your time, with this Kantian looking for an authority to decide what's true, what's real. The answer is you decide, meaning not decide, but you observe. And then he describes he sums up quickly the objectivist method of reasoning. You observe with your five senses, you conceptualize, you integrate, and so on. So I'm reminded of that when the question is, who draws the line? I mean, to an extent, I think you do. Now, you might say, let's say I respect Dr. Bernstein as a moral philosopher, so I'll sort of turn to him for guidance on this. But I think maybe the question almost sounds like, and maybe the chat room is even reflecting this, kind of like, well, this community tells you what's okay to joke about, this community, and that group decides. And I think we're going down a bit of a collectivistic path if we look at it in those terms.
Let me give an example here. Penny and I were in LA a few years ago, Rucka. That my favorite place in LA, in Venice Beach, you know, which is a very colorful, you know, place. It's like the West Village in New York transported to the ocean, you know, and you got Muscle Beach there and everything. Anyhow, there were these street performers. They were Jamaican. I don't remember their name offhand. You know, the Calypso Tumblers or something like that. Anyway, very good. And they had an MC while these guys were performing, and he was very good natured, and there was a lot of ethnic humor, but it was all done in a very good natured sense. You know, they were appealing for money from the audience. Oh, where'd you get that money? The rich Asian guy. He goes, the rich Asian guy, you know, or the rich white guy. So anyhow, at the end, they're doing their grand finale when this guy comes running up. You know, they got like 6 people bowed down. He leaps over them and tumbles in midair, and he lands on his feet on the other side, which is, you know, an impressive act of gymnastics. And they build it up to the big finale. The MC is going. He said he makes all these ethnic references, which he's been doing all along. He says, if you're Asian, he says to the audience, get your camcorder out. You know, he said, if you're white, he said, get your Minolta, you know, your whatever fancy camera you have out. He said, if you're black, he said, get your disposable Kodak ready. And he says, if you're Mexican, he says, remember this moment. You know, and I mean, and it's completely ethnic humor, but he did it in such a good-natured way. I didn't get the impression that anybody in the audience was offended, you know. And I think that, you know, and then they hadn't done Rucka and I think agree that I think, you make clear to the outset that you could do this in 30 seconds, that you're a religious individualist and your ethnic groups don't mean anything in reality. They didn't do that. But the thing they did do, the other component of this is they did it in such a good-natured way. This is where Dave Chappelle, I think, is really good. And they did it in such a good-natured way that, there might always be somebody who's going to get offended by ethnic humor, no matter how good-natured you are. I didn't notice anybody, and they had a good crowd. I didn't notice anybody in the audience who was offended, and I think doing it in a very positive way where you're obviously, you're having fun with it yourself. You could see the comedian himself is laughing, he's having a good time with this, and it's all. Yeah, I think that helps. If the comedian himself is having fun with this, and you recognize, I think it helps the audience recognize, yeah, this isn't fun. This isn't just. There's zero real bigotry going on.
Yeah, I mean, I love Venice Beach as well. It is a wonderful place to sort of people watch and all of that. Now, a lot of the times, an entertainer doesn't have the means or the time to disclaim their work by saying, by the way, here's what I actually believe. I think the fact that it's comedy might be enough to imply that this is not what he actually believes. Something that comes to mind the more I hear Dave Chappelle brought up, so him and Chris Rock, they sort of burn out a bit. I mean, Chris Rock's career is still going, but he's retired some of his material from the 90s that was sort of critical of the Black community. Dave Chappelle completely quit. He completely burned out and disappeared for years. And I think, it's worth mentioning, these guys are not individualists. They are not telling everyone out there, be an individual and doesn't matter if you're Black or white. That is not what these people believe. I think they're very virtuous in the way they've pursued a great career and the way they've perfected their craft, and perhaps in their personal lives as well. But like Andrew Dice Clay, Dave Chappelle doesn't have the philosophical base to be an individualist. He's not one. So he feels guilty when white people are laughing at his jokes about, kind of poking fun at Black stereotypes. He feels guilty and he quits. This is evident by what he did and the interviews he's given, and same with Chris Rock. Like many careers, but certainly I think the type of comedy that goes there, that jokes about race and stuff, you need to actually be for something. You need to be for individualism in order to not only get away with it in the public eye, but also to live with it yourself.
Yeah, that's a good point, Rucka.
Well, I'm kind of uncomfortable with this conversation taking place only between two straight white men. So I'm going to bring in George so we have a minority accent at least.
Okay, I thought you were going to say that I'm gay.
Well, you are Greek.
yeah, we invented that. So my question is, can a joke be good if nobody laughs at it? Or can it be bad if nobody laughs at it? Can a joke be bad if nobody laughs? Sorry, if everyone laughs, or can it be good if nobody laughs at it?
You have a philosopher. So.
Well, I think the answer to that is, to me, the answer is yes. I've seen humor that goes completely over the head of an audience, and I think Ayn Rand's humor in her novels, I think, is a good example. It's at a very high level. Like I was saying before, she's poking fun, at the modernist artist. She's poking fun at the Hegelian, Marxist, dialectic school of thinking, if you can even dignify it with the term thinking. It's a very high intellectual level of humor. She demands that her audience be at her level. Do you guys remember the gallant gallstone? Yeah. And Ayn Rand's mocking materialist and determinist theories in metaphysics. And you need to be her audience needs to be at a high philosophic level. If they are, they get the humor and they recognize that it's very funny. If they're not, it just goes over their head. And you get out of a book what you're going to get out of a book. So yeah, somebody could be very funny, but the audience may not get the joke. You hear people say, I don't get it, And they say you can't explain a joke. I mean, you can explain it, but the explanation is not gonna make it seem funny to the people who need the explanation. So I think the answer is yes. That something can be very funny, but it's the audience just doesn't get it.
And can a joke be bad, even though everyone laughs at the joke? Like if it really is a successful joke, like you have the whole audience rolling on the floor, but can it still be a bad joke?
That's an interesting question. I think there's again I haven't given much thought to this. This is just off the top of my head. I think there's different types of humor. I think people have even distinguished that there's lowbrow and highbrow. Ayn Rand's humor in her novels is very highbrow. It's very intellectual. Andrew Dice Clay is as lowbrow as you could get. I mean, he's mocking gays and immigrants and women and stuff.
I hate when people do that.
What's that?
I was joking. I said I hate when people do that.
And it depends. I think it's a certain way. It's contextual. It depends on the intellectual level of your audience. And I think Leonard Peikoff always stresses in his objective communications course, and I think this goes for comedians as much as it does for lecturers. Know your audience. Where's your audience coming from? What are their values? What can you assume about their context of knowledge?
But that's collectivistic, isn't it? Because if you adjust your message to your audience, say for example, Howard Rourke would he change his designs based on what
the landscape is the equivalent? I think the landscape is the audience in this analogy, maybe.
So it's not a customer.
Well, Howard Rourke's not going to change his design, based on what anybody thinks. He's going to design in accordance with his own judgment. I mean, if somebody makes a suggestion to him that he thinks is rationally appropriate for the building, he'll certainly incorporate it. But it's his judgment that's going to rule. As far as comedians go, if you judge that this audience is, and this may sound, conceited and arrogant and paternalistic, but if in your judgment, there are these high-level guys who do a lot of political humor, and it's, and it's at a very sophisticated level. If you think a certain audience is not right for your brand of humor, you just don't take that gig. I would think, you just don't take that gig, and you look for audiences that you think are at the same level you're at, and that will understand, that have the knowledge of politics that you have, that enables you to make these jokes about politicians.
But I'm reminded of my earlier point that comedy has gone in so many different directions. There's so many different types of it. So, know your audience definitely applies to stage stand-up comedy. But like in the age of the internet, like people sending out anonymous kind of wisecracks into the internet that's widely circulated among strangers is just it's a horse of a different color. It sort of finds the audience. It's sort of, the internet, it kind of draws in an audience that didn't know what they were checking for. It kind of cultivates the audience. That is different from getting on stage at a comedy club where you have people on a date or people out for night out. They dressed up to be there, or a banquet where you're there to kind of roast the people lightly. There's a lot of different sort of types of comedy that have continued to develop over the ages. Ain't that the truth? I don't even know, by the way, if I agree with what I said about the landscape being the equivalent of the audience. I don't know if the audience should be. Yeah, I guess it does in certain contexts. But like in a stage comedy, consider the audience as though they're the landscape, I suppose. But with the internet, you're sort of attracting the landscape to your building, if that makes sense, right? So it all depends. Context is everything.
Context is important. For the hosts, Razi, Nikos, I had an example that came to my mind from yesterday, but the language is obscene. So I mean, whether
I don't think this channel will be monetized anytime soon. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, the brief context was, I'm going going up, be interviewed on your Ron Brooks show, on the Hero Book, and so I announced it on Facebook yesterday. So I got a few hours later, I got a Facebook message, two brief messages, one after another. See if I remember the exact language. The first one was, quote, "You're a jerk off, asshole," unquote. And then the second one right after that was, quote, "What do you say to that?" unquote. Like his first comment was so insightful it merited some kind of response. And I thought that was hilariously funny. I don't know, I may be in the minority, but some people might be offended, some people might just blow it off. I thought it was really funny that somebody evidently thinks that this is a serious response to somebody you disagree with. That you disagree with somebody on some issue, or you disagree with some action that they're going to perform, and that this is a serious response, that it merits a reply. What do you say to that? I thought that was. I mean, it's sad actually if that's somebody's thought processes. But what they say is, goes back to what you were saying before, Rucka, about the whole life is beautiful. Sometimes in life, the choice is you laugh or you cry, and they can both be appropriate responses. And in this to me, I laughed rather than cry about this poor guy's mentality.
Mm-hmm. And we only know about him that much. We don't know kind of what else he's done or said or thought, where he's been since then, obviously. Yeah, right. But I just heard an echo for a second there. I was concerned that the technology is turning on us. Something I've thought of often is that comedy can it's sort of parallel to moments in life where you're really angry about something and then you sort of snap out of it. Maybe you're in a fight with someone and then you suddenly remember kind of who this person is and who you are and the larger context. And you're like, yeah, what were we so worked up about? Comedy can provide you with that type of alleviation. It can sort of lessen the tension and kind of remind you of the larger context. So as much as comedy and humor tends to drop context in order for something to be silly and fun, but it also just the laughter itself and the sort of lighthearted take on something can remind you that there is more to life than what you're currently upset about. So there's that.
I'm starting to move off center because this is this is like one of the few times I really thought about this issue about life is beautiful and that kind of humor. I can appreciate what you're saying, Rucka. I think you're right. I can appreciate that we could find these horrific events. It's for some people, whether they were victims or they're not, they're just innocent people, observing what went on, these horrible things that go on in the world. It might provide some relief from the pain, of these horrors. We still recognize the horror. I don't think anybody walked away from Life is Beautiful thinking that Nazi concentration camps or the Holocaust or anything less atrocious than they were. I certainly hope not. But you're right. It could lessen the pain. Could be a form of anesthetizing the pain of these horrific events.
Robin Williams was once visiting Germany, and an interviewer asked him, I'm obviously paraphrasing from memory, the interviewer asked Robin, why do you think comedy is so popular with Americans, but not so much here in Germany? And Robin Williams said, well, didn't you kill all the funny people?
God damn. Wow. I mean, that's ballsy, by the way, do you guys know some of my favorite European objectivists? Philip Dahmer, the German
juggler.
Juggler. And anyway, I met him. He's a good guy. Philip, if you're watching this, you and your wife, you're good people. 2 thumbs up for you. So I met him in Vegas in the Objectivist Conference in 2014 for the first time. I was talking to him. He told me he's a juggler and a comedian and everything. And like a few hours later, I met my good buddy from Norway, Vegard Martinsen, who made the longtime objectivist. And I said to him, Vegard, did you meet that guy from Germany? And he said, well, what guy? What guy from Germany? I said, the comedian. He looked at him. I guess I looked at him. He said, "Comedians." He said, "There are no comedians in Germany." And he said, "They have no sense of humor." There's ethnic. There's an ethnic joke. I said, obviously they do in Norway. There's an ethnic joke. I don't think Vega Martinson, who's a hardcore objectivist, I think literally believes that Germans are humorless. But ethnic humor, can be funny amongst people who are individualists and understand that this is all in good fun.
Mm-hmm. By the way, the internet made Germans funny. They really truly were humorless as far as I'm aware. But the internet, one of the things it did, it brought us all together in a sort of a common tongue. And
maybe
some of
American movies too. American movies, have been playing all over the world going back, I don't know, 1930s probably. And there's a lot of comedies that American, we criticize Hollywood all the time and for good reason. But they also do some, some good stuff. I mean, hope you guys have all seen My Cousin Vinny, which to me is the all-time, with Joe Pesci and Marissa Tomei, to me is like the all-time greatest comedy. But they did a lot of good comedies. The Analyze This with Robert De Niro and Billy Crystal. I mean, I thought the first Hangover, I think, didn't you mention it, Rozzy? So I thought the first Hangover was hilarious. The movie that made Bradley Cooper a star. So Hollywood's done some good stuff, including comedy, and it's been popular all over the world for many years now. Going back to, speaking of Bob Hope and Bing Crosby in the Road to movies, going back to like the pre-World War II. So it's probably helped the Germans. Like America's contribution to German culture.
Absolute, no question that entertainment.
And the sitcoms on TV too.
Absolute, no question that entertainment has sort of brought the world together in a sort of a common understanding. But I think the internet sort of injected that process with steroids, because now you have people in Germany, people in a little obscure village in the middle of Italy could be creating content that's resonating with millions of people around the world. I mean, Donald Trump might be president because of a joke that someone made in Malta. Just if you sort of trace back to the mood of the American people and some of the content. I mean, obviously I'm being a little bit hyper-focused on one little strain of influence, but the world is flat, if I can use that phrase. The world, the internet has made it possible for anyone with a sense of humor who sort of figures out the formula of how to meme, of how to create a circulated joke. Anyone around the world could contribute to that. And so today, some of the funniest people in my world are in Sweden, in Germany. I mean, the biggest guy on YouTube is Swedish. The Swedish are not known historically for being funny, but one of the funniest influential people on the planet today is a Swede.
Hopefully the internet can flatten the coronavirus too.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully the internet can spread a better philosophy for living on Earth.
By the way, I think of the things that the types of ethnic humor that are frowned upon today, I don't think jokes about Germans and Swedes are up there.
Yeah,
But,
white men, and neo-Nazis and stuff, they're all fair game.
But speaking of ethnic, our next question is
Wow, you're lucky you're something yourself, Rozzy. What are you? Yeah, you actually told me. Well, your last name sounds very Ashkenazi. You sort of lucked out with the.
I'm gonna go with I'm brown. So.
All right.
Yeah, you're right. Nobody objects to jokes about Germans because they all have the mentality that they're not. A lot of people have the mentality they're Nazis or they're the descendants of Nazis or they're sympathetic to Nazis, and so they're fair game.
And no one ever says I'm German and that offends me. It's sort of like American hillbillies. No one ever says, hey, I'm a redneck and that offends me. So it's sort of a backhanded compliment when you laugh at someone because you know it's not going to bother them. I guess I don't know. But yes, the Germans certainly, they've got another good 50 to 100 years of just taking it on the chin before they can start, sticking up for themselves.
Amen.
Hi. Yeah, so I've got a question that is related to a question that I think Nikos brought up, which is something about punching up and punching down. So maybe someone can explain that, what that actually means. And also, I have a question. about the structure of a joke or the anatomy of, a joke. So is it the case that a joke has, like that you can identify a particular sort of, structure that it has? For example, an idea that I came across, I think, in a Robert Mayhew lecture was that a joke is the object of a joke is something lowly, something sort of you want to ridicule, something that you want to say is not real in some sense or is bad in some sense. So that kind of relates to, I guess, punching. That maybe the metaphor of punching, sort of makes sense. So
That
then,
was
if
the
you're,
word before. That was the word before that Nico's used
yeah,
that I didn't get punching up and punching down. I didn't. Now, thank you, Eamon. I get the word. I just don't know what it means in that context.
yeah. So I think it kind of means you're ridiculing. So if you're punching up, you're ridiculing people who are powerful. So satire is meant to, some people say satire is meant to punch up because it's meant to punch at and ridicule people in power, for example. And then, but there's lots of jokes about there's lots of jokes about people you might regard as down underneath you. So I don't know, Mr. Bean, maybe you can think of as an example of people are laughing at someone who's silly, who gets things wrong, who is, in some sense, he's not powerful in any sense. He's bad stuff is happening to him all the time.
But he was
So
happy.
yeah. So I'm interested in this idea of that jokes are meant to say something about what you think is bad or worth ridiculing, and then just the general sort of idea of punching up and punching down and structure of a joke.
Well, you're a deep thinker, Eamon. We know that already. So the one thing that occurred to me, two examples occurred to me while you were talking of punching up. Punching at people in power who are ridiculous, and it goes back to the German issue from before. Because George, I was in Greece. When was it? Last May, I think. I was lecturing for the Free Market Roadshow, and somebody there told me a great joke. Let's see if I remember it. So Angela Merkel, visits Greece, and she's going through passport control. And the officer asks her, "Occupation?" And she said, "No, just a vacation." Now this, come on, that's really funny. Now I told my students that they didn't get it. I use that as an example in the logic class because the humor revolves around the equivocation on the term occupation. Right? You're changing the meaning of the term occupation in the middle of the joke. When the passport control guy asks her occupation, what do you do for a living? And she's taking it to me, no, are you going to conquer us? No, I'm just here for vacation. So you're right, Rucka. The Germans are going to have to deal with this for the next 100 years ago. But it's a good example, I think. You're punching up at somebody in power. She is in many cases what she stands for in the EU is ridiculous, and she deserves a good slap across the head. And the Germans have earned this reputation for occupation in the conquering sense. But the other joke that occurred to me about punching up, that was when Bill Clinton was president. Yeah, he's my favorite president because the humor that revolved around that guy's presidency throughout the 1990s was just hilarious. I think this was Jay Leno, who said, he says, the Speaker of the House, I said, I don't know if you heard this. He goes, but the Speaker of the House went to the president today and he said, "Mr. President, what do you want to do about the abortion bill?" And the president thought about it for a second. He said, "I'll pay it." Now this is hilarious. This is good stuff. Again, equivocated on the term bill, right? Changing the meaning of the word in the middle of the joke with the Speaker of the House, the bill meaning piece of proposed legislation, and the president takes it to mean an invoice from the abortionist for because one of his girlfriends was pregnant. So I think one point I think we can make is a lot of really good humor revolves around changing the meaning of a word in the middle of the joke, which if you do it in an argument is a logical fallacy. It's equivocation, but in a different context, it's very effective. I also think that the punching up at, if that's what that phrase means, at people in authority who are ridiculous. I think is very funny. And the last point I'll make is about punching down. It reminds me of what Aristotle says in the Nicomachean Ethics about, it's vulgar to show off. If you're like way more knowledgeable than other people, it's vulgar to show off, your knowledge and, in front of them. It's like an exhibit of strength in front of the physically frail. So I think there's you make fun of people who are victims or hapless or ineffectual in life, or there's who are vulnerable in some legitimate way. I mean, a lot of people aren't going to find that fun. They're going to find it vulgar, crude, and just mean spirited. So yeah, I think comedians need to be careful. When they do that, when they're making fun of some poor kid because he's fat, whatever, like the mean girls, the mean spirited kids in middle school do. You don't want to come off like the mean girls, in the schoolyards.
Mm-hmm. I've always had people reaching out to me as long as I've been in the public light, always saying, "Hey, can you poke fun at my nationality? Can you poke fun of my group?" And one of the many requests I've gotten is like people who can't walk saying, "Can you make fun of cripples?" And like, to me, it's such an unfunny thing to joke about. And yeah, it's mean spirited, but obviously not everyone would appreciate the song. But like, I think a lot of people appreciate being poked fun at. It makes them feel included. It makes them feel like they're not, no one feels bad for them. It's a fascinating topic to me. Now, the issue of punching up and punching down is largely perpetuated by the social justice left, I think. They say these groups over here are marginalized and oppressed. Even if you're not meaning to oppress them, you don't even know. The fact you don't know you're oppressing them is proof that you're oppressing them. And this group over here are the ones in charge, and they're privileged, and they've got power, and so it's perfectly fine to make fun of them, but not of them over here. So obviously we need to separate kind of that ideology from just the general principle, like, well, when is it right to make fun of someone who is oppressed? There is a difference between wearing blackface and doing that in the Jim Crow South, standing nearby a tree where a person had been lynched and hung, versus the world where I would like to see in the future. I have a dream where blacks, whites, mulattoes, and everyone else can work together to joke about things that have been taboo, and maybe even decriminalize blackface because they see eye to eye on this. Not everyone needs to share this dream, but that to me is where I see professional comedians going in the future. Who knows what's going to happen? Again, context is everything. But the important thing for me is always remember, individualism is the antidote to racism. Individualism. There's more to fighting racism than just fighting racism. Individualism is it. So individualism in philosophy, and specifically politics, individual rights and the protection of the rights of the individual. When we have a culture, when we have a society that recognizes these principles, then separating people by groups and saying this group is oppressed and this group is in power is a much tougher sell, and it's much more difficult to police comedy in that type of future.
Yeah, if we can educate people to the principles of individualism and individual rights and everything that means, and that we judge people seriously on only what's open to their volitional choice, their moral character, and we don't judge them in any serious way based on what they're born into. Then I think and if we do this in a very lighthearted and benevolent way, and the jokes are a very good-natured way, I think it opens up the whole possibility of making jokes about any different kind of groups, even cripples, and I don't think in that context where we're very clear that we judge people seriously only on their character, not on any other factor. and when we do this in a very lighthearted and good-natured way, then they, maybe lighthearted jokes about cripples maybe can be funny. Maybe it will, the audience will. I think an honest audience will have much less trouble appreciating it than when that context of of individualism and goodwill, those two factors are that foundation is laid.
Nikos has to go, but I think he before he goes, he has a lighthearted joke about cripples. Nikos.
Oh, there we go.
No, that's not actually the opposite. So, but Rucka said something that gave me a last thought. So, yeah, I think if you make fun of someone who is, the victim of bullying or something, then yeah, you're a jerk. But something very interesting about punching up and punching down. So you said something which is very correct. It's very rare that the people who police what is an actual joke and not are the quote victims or the actual victims. So you never see someone or you very rarely see someone who says, look, I've been a LGBT person and I have been bullied and I find this joke offensive. Usually it's their, let's say, their bureaucratic representatives, which are actually doing them something which is very detrimental. Because what do they say? They say, oh, we are empowering these people, and see how this is taking away agency from these people. So it basically says you cannot stand up for yourself, or you cannot even know what is good for you. I will empower you, right? So basically, I will give you voice. I remember, actually, that's not my idea. That was, I think, a common friend that I have with Razi had this idea. There was this poster in a university, LGBT workshop, Find Your Voice. So think what this means. This means that someone who is part of this community or who identifies as such and doesn't want to be part of a community, that person needs to find a voice, right? So how paternalistic and how taking away the agency from these people. So I would agree that, quote, punching down, if you do it on an individual person who is in a position that has suffered or something like, yeah, then if I do this, then I'm a jerk. But this idea that there is this kind of committee of bureaucrats who, quote, empower these groups, I think actually they should be ridiculed. And the idea of empowering someone is an idea that needs to be ridiculed, because you cannot get empowered. You can have the power yourself and get your power yourself, but no one can, quote, empower you. And since I don't want to be a kind of plagiarizer, this idea comes from Frank Furedi, which we should have in one of our next meetings, maybe, Razi.
Andy or Rucka, do you have any comments on what Nikos had to say?
Well, I mean, I think that's a good point. What's his name? I forget George. His last name Milo. You guys know Milo. What's his last name?
Yiannopoulos.
Yeah, Milo Yiannopoulos. Now he's a provocateur. And he's very often he's not making serious points, but he didn't require, as this gay, white male, or this gay guy. He didn't require, some group of bureaucrats or leftist politicians to empower him or give him a voice, right? He identified his own. Whether I agree with what he does or he doesn't, he goes his own way, and he's not following. No, one thing I like about Milo is he's not following the prescribed leftist path that the left expects gay guys to follow. So I don't think, or maybe a much better example of that, somebody I really do respect almost unreservedly, is Candace Owens. You guys know who Candace Owens is, right? She's anyway. She's a young Black American woman. She's conservative, very, very supportive of capitalism. She's a writer, very, very brilliant spokesman against racism in all of its iterations. She says she's getting interested in running, getting into politics. I don't think she's old enough to run for president yet, but in a few years she will. Hope she becomes the Republican nominee for president. I'd vote for Candace Owens in a heartbeat.
Why is that? I
The
mean,
Candace Owens?
is it for her political positions, or do you just like having someone shattering those sort of racial roles that people expect? People
Well,
like,
it's all of the above. I mean, she's very, very religious, but I'll live with that. She's an outstanding polemicist against the left. I mean, I think she's brilliant in exposing, uh, the harm that the left has done, and specifically the harm it's done to the Black American community. So I think if she goes into politics, as contemporary politicians go, I couldn't think of anybody who's as good as her.
yeah, certainly in today's political landscape, I don't know how bad she would be, but I would say keep an eye on her. See what happens when her implicit individualism comes in conflict with religion, comes in conflict with protectionism, a la Trump, comes in conflict with nationalism. I would say she will ultimately disappoint us, like they all do, but she may be one of the best options for now.
I think what you say is probably true, but I do think, given the alternatives, I think she'd be by far the lesser of all those evils, by far.
Mm-hmm. But let the record show that Dr. Bernstein's opinion of Milo was clearly formed a few years ago. Milo has certainly gone far from like where he was at the start.
Is that right? Has he changed his methods?
I think he's gotten more consistent, as people do. The contradictions manifested ultimately, and the less rational side took over. So back in 2014, 2015, around that time, I remember thinking, oh my God, a gay guy who's not, a hard leftist. I thought, like a lot of people, I thought, wow, Milo, I love this guy. I mean, I knew there were concerning things about him, but still, it's like he was talking about, college professors persecuting individual-minded people, and he would talk about, the free market. In his book, he talked about reading Atlas Shrugged growing up and how it inspired him. And flash forward to where he is now. The last I saw from him was a few months ago. He's on some obscure website, the only place he can still be on. I mean, the way he was deplatformed is, absolutely wrong. I mean, if he should be deplatformed, then so should a lot of leftists and a lot of other people that are far worse. But anyway, he's on some obscure website, sitting with some alt-right scumbag, some real racist, and Milo is pleading with the guy, trying to appease him, he's saying, do we need an ethno-state? Wouldn't it just be enough if we're all Christian? Basically, he's sitting with this Holocaust denier, and Milo is basically asking him, look, we agree that that we need some type of nationalism and some type of anti-immigration standard and all that, but wouldn't it be enough if we're just all Christian rather than being a white ethno-state? It's absolutely pathetic that the level that Milo sunk to. But this is what you get with mixed premises. This is what you get when you're anti-left without being for something positive. When your answer to the collectivists is basically religion and more collectivism. So I think Milo, we could have seen this. We saw the signs that were troubling early on, and certainly at this point in time, there is very little daylight between him and the Nazis, in my estimation.
You're right, Rucka. I haven't followed Milo for years now, so I didn't realize that he had sunk to the alt-right level mentality. That's really sad. Well, thanks for pointing that out.
Sure.
Yeah, I should probably point out that Candace Owens, I mean, I don't think she's where Milo is, but I disagree with you, Andy, on her. I think she is using race just as much as the left uses it. She's just using it in a different way, but I think she plays the left's game. She's a response, she's a reaction to the left, and not much is original there. And I actually am especially worried with someone like her, who would then tweet a quote of Ayn Rand, and people will associate her ways, with objectivism. But that can be a topic for a whole discussion. I think Candace Owens is quite a prominent and definitely well-spoken person, and we should discuss her some more.
Well, I think she's a brilliant young conservative intellectual. She has the flaws of the conservatives. I mean, she's devoutly religious, but but again, given the contemporary context, I certainly prefer her to anybody else I could think of. Maybe Nikki Haley would be the other possibility of somebody, you know, that I would like to see as Republican candidate, you know, and to see elected president in 2024.
Well, I'm with you on Nikki Haley, and
she's a Sikh, right? So we still got the minority thing going.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Finally, those Sikhs will get their voice heard. I mean, look, in terms of like who do I want in political power, I could see the case being made that Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens are better. You know, they'll respect the Constitution more than the lunatics, than the other lunatics running. I understand that argument, but in terms of a cultural, a sort of cultural symbol, I see Candace Owens as PragerU is giving her her own show. They're putting her in the spotlight twice a week and all these things. They love having a black woman conservative, to the point where it's like, yeah, what are we talking about ideas, or is this just become a contest of who has more black friends?
Well, it doesn't hurt that she's a beautiful woman. She's black, and she's, you know, extremely articulate. I mean, she's very, very good speaker and passionate about it. So, you know, she's made for the camera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but keep an eye on Turning Point USA, guys. Keep an eye. That guy Charlie Kirk, he was a former Yaron Brook super fan, from what I've heard. His speeches used to sound like a Yaron Brook speech, from what Yaron has described. So Charlie Kirk, former, never an objectivist, but friendly to objectivism, and now he's basically just an out-and-out Trump cheerleader. There's nothing Trump can do that Charlie Kirk would take issue with. And this is why the ultimate battle is philosophical. The ultimate battle is in the realm of ideas, because we cannot live with mixed premises.
No, you're right, Rucka. Again, you guys follow politics more closely than I do. I've spoken for Turning Point, so I had a lot of respect for that organization. I didn't realize Charlie Kirk had become a Trump cheerleader. I mean, I support Trump as the lesser of two evils, but there's a great deal about him that's just flat out wrong. I didn't realize that Charlie Kirk had evolved, you know, that egregiously.
Oh, his book, I think, just has a picture of Donald Trump on it, on the cover. That's his book that Charlie Kirk is releasing. I saw Trump posting a picture of it. Yeah, I mean, there's no question. I think what's unfolded on the right, and of course, you can't separate politics from culture, of course. So the right is a cultural movement as much as it's in electoral politics. The right there's nothing left of the Tea Party. There's nothing left almost of being friendly to capitalism. It's barely even something they pay lip service to these days. Hopefully that changes. Who knows? Maybe the leftists will start arguing for socialism so loud that the right will react. I mean, it's sad that we're in this state that we need to like hope that the right starts to pay lip service to capitalism and send people to run for office to sort of buy some time. We certainly have fallen on hard times, my friends. Better pray.
We're here to discuss humor, right?
Yeah.
So, Razi, I see we only have a few minutes left. Is that correct?
Yeah, we only have a few minutes left. We have George has his hand raised, so George will ask a question, and then I will ask the one chat question that is remaining, and then we'll go back to the two of you for answers and final closing remarks. George.
I'm sorry, it's not a question. It's just the discussion that you had about Candace Owens reminded me of something that happened to me, and I would like to share that experience. So I used to work for Citigroup, and at some point while I was there, we invited Condoleezza Rice to come and talk to us. So Condoleezza Rice, obviously one of the most powerful humans on earth when George Bush Jr. was in government, and she came to talk to us. So I sat her on the stage, and she was going to be interviewed by various people, like head of diversity, head of the women's group of Citigroup, and some other people. And they kept asking her questions, trying to prod her to get a sob story, like, where have you been oppressed? Where has a white man stopped you from doing your job? Where has someone like declined promotion to you because of your color or your gender? And she was, I don't agree with her politics. In fact, I disagree with most of it, but she was very respectable, and she answered and she said, nobody. And she gave advice. They asked her, what advice would you give to women? And just do a good job and be confident about your opinion and express it eloquently and like articulately, and you will be fine, and just focus on your work. And you should see the disappointment that all these managers, diversity managers and things had, that she didn't play the part that they expected her to play in this interview. It was really an eye-opening moment for me. I really enjoyed that.
You know, George, from their point of view, I get it. But at the same time, they didn't do much homework on Condoleezza Rice if they expected, you know, a different answer than the one they got.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think there may be a bit of a tendency on the non-left to say that, you know, there's no racism at all, and that, you know, that there's nothing stopping anyone black from achieving anything. It is very endearing seeing someone like Condoleezza just not even thinking in those terms. And I mean, there was someone back in like the 1920s or even earlier, like one of the first black singers ever, famous singers ever. I read an essay by her in high school. I don't remember what her name is, but she wrote, like, she said, I don't even consider people that are racist towards me. If they don't want my lovely company, I just feel bad for them. She said, I absolutely love being a famous singer. I love my work. I have no chip on my shoulder about my, you know, slave ancestors. And this was at a time when like the slaves were still alive, some of them. There's something very beautiful about an enduring spirit. But also remember, like, let's not always assume that just because the left race baits all the time, that means that there is no racism. I mean, we live in a highly mixed economy. We live in a highly unfree and collectivistic-minded culture in a certain respect. When the government was paving roads in the 20th century, who do you think got better roads leading them to work opportunities? The white neighborhoods or the predominantly black neighborhoods? In other words, which communities had more friends in the government, local and federal? You need to remember that when we have a mixed economy, when we have violation of rights, we get a lobby system. And when we have a lobby system, then it does unfortunately become pressure group politics. And the group in the early 20th century that has more favors to pull in the government is going to have just better stuff from the government. So there is, you know, and today certainly, like the war on drugs affects black neighborhoods more than it affects white neighborhoods. My point here is not to open this Pandora's box in the last 2 seconds of our time here together, but let's remember, always look at the facts. It's not necessarily true that there is no racism. It's just that what is important, what is true, is that we need to have the antidote. Again, individualism and laissez-faire capitalism as the means to abolish such institutional racism wherever it may be.
Yeah, Andy, let me just very quickly read the last question that we have. Are women funny? Now, let me just say this question comes from a woman. I'm not going to name her because she asked it in a private message, but yeah, whoever wants to take that question.
I mean, the question's funny. Are women funny? I think that, you know, the answer to that is it's highly individualized. I mean, there have been some very, very successful and I think funny, you know, female comedians, and it depends. That's an individual quality of being funny. It's not gender based.
Yeah, there have been many women, successful comedic writers that are women, and stand-up comics, although the loudest ones out there are the unfunny ones, so they give their sisters a bad name, I suppose. In my experience, the funniest women have been not trying to be. And I don't mean that I'm laughing at them. I mean their personalities sort of exert this sort of funny sort of take on things. or kind of like without meaning to be funny, just being intelligent. I think when people are intelligent in general, you get funny observations and just a funny take on things. So that's something that I have found. Of course, our favorite woman here, Ayn Rand, is hysterical and perhaps never even tried to be, just extraordinarily intelligent and with an artist, with a sort of a heart of an artist in the way she looked at the world. And she came up with these very, very funny, outputs. So yeah, but and I think on average you get more men who are like trying to be funny and writing and revising and sort of composing comedy. More on average, you get that from men than you do with women. And why that is, I don't know.
Ayn Rand was, she's, like I said, hilariously funny at a very high intellectual level. I think it's very clear she was deliberately satirizing modernist artists and intellectuals. I could tell you, one of my sisters is one of the funniest people you'll ever meet, but her humor is so obscene that I couldn't possibly say some of the things she says, on an internet audience. But I mean, she is hilariously funny. And when speaking to people who are somewhat staid or religious or don't like sexual humor, they're scandalized by the thing. But she's hilarious. She really is.
So, are we ending on that note that women can be funny? Is that the conclusion?
It's possible, but we haven't heard of a case. No, I'm joking. Everyone relax. Don't cancel us. An individual can be funny. Women as a group cannot.
Yeah, that's a good point. There are many individual women who are funny. Can I wrap it up with what I started with, Razi? Do we have a minute or two?
Yep.
Because I started with the LGBTQXYZ phenomenon, and I think reductio ad absurdum, the logical method of taking some idea and then reducing it to the absurd can be hilarious. So I mocked that mentality, that you can be any gender you want to be simply by identifying with. I said, so if somebody, believes he's an elephant, and gets down on all fours and wears an elephant costume and puts a trunk on and walks around and trumpets, and trumpets like an elephant, then of course, since he identifies with being an elephant, he's an elephant. And I think by reducing some of these bizarre ideas to the absurd, and people will laugh, when the imagery of somebody walking down Fifth Avenue, on all fours, trumpeting with his trunk, and trying to convince people he's an elephant. The imagery is funny, and I think you could, humor in that way, especially as a reductio ad absurdum, can be a very effective form of showing the absurdity of various irrational theories.
There is a very vibrant response to the left coming from very young people. And once again, the internet is what brings them together and sort of emboldens a lot of these kids. So I think people growing up today and even a short time ago, they see the left as the uncool, the boring adults that are trying to censor everybody's fun and spoil the party. So I think there's reason to be optimistic about the left perhaps being defeated, I suppose, or a certain type of the left being defeated in upcoming generations. But what's the alternative? Now, that is what concerns me, and that is sometimes what worries me.
Well, if the internet is the battlefield, the Ayn Rand Center UK is now present on the internet. We've recently discovered it against our will because we have to. So we're going to keep doing events like this, and I want to thank both of our speakers. Hopefully you'll join us again now that we are doing 3 of these a week. We hopefully will see you again several times, and thanks to everybody else who joined. Our next event is Saturday at 7. Hope to see you all there.